Conservative new media viewers, Jeremy Lin fans around the world, Charlotte Hornets fans around the world. What's up? It's me, PFE, Paul F. Villarreal, the NBA expert. We're here to discuss three quick things, one of which I was thinking about that I did not include in the last long video that I made discussing Jeremy Lin and the roster. One of them, the ESPN rankings that just came out, including Jeremy Lin ranked number 197 in the NBA. And one of them about something that I was thinking about based upon what Coach Steve Clifford said on one of the days of training camp, I believe. It might have been media day. Actually, it was media day plus I think a little bit of one of the days of training camp. But it made me think something more about the roster and about the power forward spot. So I just wanted to go over these things quickly because it's easier to do it in this format as opposed to doing it on Twitter where you only have, whatever it is, 150 characters to do that. First, let me say, just to make it easier for viewers of this video, I will put timestamps in the video description below the video player. So if you're only interested in one of these issues instead of all three of them, you can just go down to there. There will be a numerical, say like 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And so if you click on that, that'll take you to whatever the corresponding content is of that. So you don't have to watch the entire video if you don't want to. There's some way to put like little, almost like thumb tabs on the video. And I wanted to do that for the long video about the roster, but I don't know how to do it. I just haven't learned how to do that yet. When I learn how to do it, I will put that on some of the longer videos just to make it easier for people to kind of go through these videos, particularly the longer ones. Okay, first let's start with the, I'll just start with the ESPN ranking just to kind of get it over with. So ESPN ranked Jeremy Lin number 197 out of however many players there are in the league, something like, I don't know, 450, 430, something like that. And last year they ranked him number 100. So according to them, he dropped 97 rankings. They do have some kind of method for doing this. Like there's some type of points system. So this is not completely arbitrary for them. I don't know what that system is. I just said this. I'll just say it now. And I said this on Twitter. I'm not concerned about these rankings whatsoever. These are things that are just meant to be discussion items for fans around the world, around the internet. And they're meant to get clicks. They're content that people will click on and examine and argue about. So it really is meaningless. I know Ido Amir said that on Twitter and others have said the same thing, and I 100% agree. The one thing, though, is they did project with the ranking, ESPN projected Jeremy Lin to have a negative, slightly negative RPM for the 2015-2016 season. What RPM means is real plus minus. This has to do with how the team performs when the player is on the court. And I believe it's based on 100 possessions. So if you have a +1 RPM, I think what that means is the team is 1 point better over 100 possessions when you are on the floor. And that could be some combination of offense and defense. So you might be +0.5 in offense and +0.5 in defense, and that adds up to +1.0. And this is kind of like the new comprehensive metric with which to compare players. It replaces things like PER and more statistical individual measurements. This is a team-oriented measurement. And honestly, it's probably good to do this. It's good in terms of using this as a comparative metric because somebody could have great individual stats, but when they're on the court, the team suffers. And so I actually think this is good that they're doing this. However, I know that the last two seasons, at least, Jeremy Lin has had a positive RPM, meaning that the team is better when he is on the court. So I don't know how they arrived at this negative prediction. I'm sure there's some type of logic or formula to it, but I don't know what it is. However, just in response to that, based upon Jeremy's trajectory, my guess would be that he's going to finish with a positive RPM. Now, RPM is somewhat dependent on your teammates, as KP Chan mentioned on Twitter. However, it is the reason why they call it quote unquote real plus minus is because they try to take as many dependent things out of the statistic as they can. In other words, they just really want to isolate the player and get away from whatever the teammates are and all this. There's a chance that because Jeremy Lin is coming into a new situation with new teammates, and say if Frank Kaminsky's on the second unit, he's playing with the rookie. So there's a chance that the net effect of all this newness could hurt Jeremy Lin. Maybe that does put him into a negative RPM category. However, based upon the fit of Jeremy Lin with this team and the optimism of Jeremy Lin and just how he feels about how things are going to go with here, I personally think he's going to have a pretty good year. There's only one concern that I have, and that's another one of the topics here that I'll mention in a second. I think things set up well for him. I think he's going to do well this season. I think that Steve Clifford's defensive schemes will probably help Jeremy. So in terms of his defense or defensive stats, that might come up a little bit. So again, I personally think that he's going to have another positive season of RPM. Really, that's the only thing I'm concerned about with these ESPN rankings. The ranking itself is just, it has no value, basically. But I am interested in why they are giving him a negative RPM projection. And I think that I am hopeful and optimistic that it's going to be positive again for at least a third straight year. If you know much about statistics, RPM is coming from another statistic known as RAPM, real adjusted plus minus. The person who did real adjusted plus minus was hired by ESPN to do real plus minus. So I'd have to go back and look at what his RAPM figure was from 3 years ago for Jeremy Lin to see if the trend continues positive. He has had one or two maybe negative ones in recent years, but in the last 2 years, it's been better. So hopefully that'll continue. Now, I mentioned something about one concern that I have, and this I did not mention in the video about Jeremy and the roster. This is a minor concern, but given the way that Jeremy plays the game, it is something that could affect him. And that is playing pick and pop basketball as opposed to playing pick and roll basketball. If you look at the potential second unit for the Hornets, which we went over in the roster video, so you can go see it there. Essentially, it looks like, or could be, Jeremy Lin, Jeremy Lamb, Marvin Williams, Frank Kaminsky, and Spencer Hawes. The two big men in that potential lineup, Kaminsky and Hawes, you would think would be more of pick and pop type of players. Pick and pop just means when you set a pick and go into a pick and roll type of a setup, rather than the man setting the screen rolling to the basket, he instead sets up for a long distance jump shot. That is referred to as a pop instead of a roll to the basket. You set up so you can pop a jump shot, basically. Jeremy, as he discussed in his time in Los Angeles last year, where he also was in many instances of pick and pop with players like Carlos Boozer and Jordan Hill, Jeremy prefers playing pick and roll as opposed to the screen setters flaring out for jump shots. One of the reasons why this works well for Jeremy is because it having the screen setter go to the basket after setting the screen, it puts more pressure immediately on the rim area. So what usually happens in this circumstance is that Jeremy is going against the center or something like that on these pick and roll plays. And what happens is when the man who sets the screen rolls to the basket, Jeremy has two different options. He can either drive to the basket and try to score, or else if the big man who's now defending Jeremy, because the play caused a defensive switch where Jeremy's point guard defender is no longer guarding him. Now he's being guarded by like a center. If the center comes out closer to Jeremy while Jeremy drives to the rim, then he just throws a simple alley-oop lob, and this is where you end up with the Ed Davis and Tyson Chandler easy dunks. It takes a different set of skills to be able to excel in pick and pop as compared with pick and roll. Not completely different, but some slight differences. Because what happens in pick and pop, instead of Jeremy having another, like a big man to help him at the rim, he's then usually isolated one-on-one at the rim. So it's Jeremy versus oftentimes a center. He can do that. It's not like Jeremy can't excel in that situation, but he's still refining some of the aspects of his game that can help him in that situation, such as shooting a floater, such as just refining a little bit his one-on-one moves. Because oftentimes also what will happen when you get that type of a defensive switch is you'll have, before you're going towards the basket, you will be on the perimeter still against the big man. This is like you see maybe Chris Paul being defended by, I don't know, Shaq or some center. And then usually point guards in that circumstance, they can put on little moves, do a one-on-one move, get the guy going backwards and shoot a jump shot over them. Jeremy's better going to the rim than he is setting up for an off-the-dribble jump shot. I'm not saying he can't do that. He can, but the best version of Jeremy Lin is pick and roll Jeremy Lin as compared with pick and pop Jeremy Lin. So this is probably the only concern that I have for Jeremy this season, 2015-2016 season. Of course, there's always the health concern, but we're just assuming that his health is good this year. I hope that he's able to play a decent amount of pick and roll and not just pick and pop. Now, Spencer Hawes is noted as an outside shooter, but he's decent at pick and roll. He is solid, I believe, in pick and roll. Frank Kaminsky, I don't know how he is in pick and roll, although you would imagine because of his shooting range, he would like to do a lot of pick and pop and shoot the outside jumper the way that Jordan Hill did last year, Carlos Boozer does. There is one person, though, on the team that I think can be effective in the pick and roll, and that I haven't researched their statistics enough to know how good he is in pick and roll, is Cody Zeller. Cody Zeller is kind of well known in NBA circles because he has very short arms relative to his height. But to kind of compensate for that short reach, he's an excellent jumper. He jumps well. And he's got enough height, he's listed at 7 foot, where if you combine his good vertical with his natural height, he's still somebody that should be able to get up and over the rim and dunk the ball. Now, I'm not saying that Cody Zeller is Ed Davis or something like that, and there's going to be some incredible Lin-Zeller connection, but I do think he's one person that might be able to excel with Jeremy Lin in pick and roll, at least among bigger players. Al Jefferson, with the weight loss that he underwent this summer, maybe that will help him as well. I don't know how good Al is in pick and roll, although I would imagine that Al prefers to play post up as compared with pick and roll because he's one of the best in the NBA in terms of posting up, if not the best. Now, the third topic that I wanted to touch on here kind of goes along with this pick and pop versus pick and roll. And it is who's going to end up starting for the Charlotte Hornets at the beginning of the season in the power forward spot. Steve Clifford mentioned, again, either on media day and or practice session interviews thereafter, he mentioned that it looks like there are four starting spots pretty much locked up, and they are all the starting spots except for the power forward. Which sounds like then there's a chance that Cody Zeller won't start. And the natural inclination, given the circumstances, given that they just drafted Frank Kaminsky in the lottery, would be, well, okay, if Cody Zeller doesn't start, then Frank Kaminsky's going to start. Based upon a couple of other comments that Steve Clifford made, I want to just put the idea out there that I think there's a chance, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's a chance that Marvin Williams could end up being the starting power forward at the beginning of the season for the Charlotte Hornets. Steve Clifford mentioned in these recent remarks, he mentioned that Marvin Williams is best used as a power forward rather than as a small forward. He's capable of playing both positions. And he really went out of his way to praise how hard Marvin Williams worked in this offseason. He has also mentioned that Frank Kaminsky looks great, except that Frank needs a little bit of time, perhaps, to get used to the physical nature of the NBA. Meaning Frank needs to get a little bit stronger and just get used to how strong his opponents are going to be on both ends of the court. Frank could end up starting. I mean, I think we could all see that scenario being the case. But one other thing that Steve Clifford mentioned was that he wants the team to have balance. If you go back to the video that I made about the roster, I said that the starting lineup is going to have trouble with spacing if the starting lineup includes Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Cody Zeller, and now Jefferson, because those are three players who aren't noted for the perimeter shooting ability. Well, what if you take Cody Zeller out of that lineup and you insert somebody like Marvin Williams or Frank Kaminsky? Then your spacing gets a whole bunch better because both Kaminsky and Williams are capable of shooting and hitting a three-point shot. That I can kind of see the wheels moving in Steve Clifford's mind. Again, I'm not projecting anything here, but I now can see a scenario where Marvin Williams might start or Frank Kaminsky might start. If that happens, then Cody Zeller moves into the second unit, and that might help Jeremy Lin out with this pick and pop versus pick and roll situation. Cody Zeller is capable of hitting a 15 to 17 foot jump shot. He just doesn't, his range doesn't go all the way out to the 3-point line, I don't think. But I do think he's capable of succeeding in the pick and roll. And so what I'm telling you is all of this could be solved. Jeremy Lin, pick and pop versus pick and roll, Charlotte spacing issues with the first team. All of this might be solved by Cody Zeller not being the starting power forward. And if you had to guess, it'd be probably one of two men that would be put into the starting lineup rather than Cody Zeller, and that would be Marvin Williams or Frank Kaminsky, although I guess you could also say you could put Spencer Hawes in there as well. He's capable of playing power forward. So that's going through my mind. Maybe that happens. Maybe we see Marvin Williams, who's a veteran. He's been with the team. The team knows what he can do. They're comfortable with him. He has chemistry with his teammates already. He's not a rookie coming in. He can space the floor. Maybe that's how this gets done. Maybe that's how, as Coach Clifford mentioned, maybe that's how the team has a little bit better, quote-unquote, balance in its lineups. And that'd be interesting. Like I said, I'd be eager to see Jeremy Lin and Cody Zeller playing pick and roll together. That's probably the combination that would most interest me at this point in time in terms of having somebody as a real finisher, as a big man for Jeremy Lin to work with. So that is it. I just wanted to keep this relatively short. those three topics. So we talked about ESPN ranking, Jeremy Lin pick and roll versus pick and pop, and how that might affect him a little bit this year, and hopefully it doesn't affect him in a negative way, and the possibility of someone besides Cody Zeller starting at the power forward position for the Hornets at the beginning of the 2015-2016 season. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video. Thumbs up, thumbs down, your comments below. I'll be on Twitter when I can. I was already on there earlier today. What do you think? Are you concerned about Jeremy having to play perhaps more pick and pop than he would like to, or that would be optimum for him? Who do you think is going to end up starting at power forward for the Charlotte Hornets? And finally, are you concerned about the ESPN ranking? Do you just not care, which is pretty much the position that I'm coming from? How do you think Jeremy's going to do in terms of RPM this season? Is it going to be positive, a good number, or do you think it's going to be negative, a minus number, or not so good? Again, I'm optimistic, and I think this is going to be a good year. I think it's going to be a good year for the team. I think it's going to be a good year for Jeremy personally. That is it. Take care. We will talk to you again soon. I will be putting this video up on Twitter as soon as it's rendered and ready, and I'll probably make it one of those sticky tweets that kind of stays at the top so that people can find this a little bit easier. That's it for now. We are today is day, 4, I think, of training camp. And we're just a few days out from the first preseason game, which I believe is coming up this Saturday. So can't wait. 2015-16 season is here, and we're still trying to figure out how the roster is going to look, who's going to play with whom, and in the lineups, and so on and so forth. Take care. Talk to you again soon.